everybody, this is Caitlin here, and welcome to Card Game Wednesday, the day of the week where we discuss all things card game related, mainly Forcible related obviously, but today we have something a little bit different. I've been trying to think of different ideas to do in between when I don't have any deck profiles or any news to cover, or basically anything going on with the new cluster or pre-releases or anything like that. So I've been trying to think about it, and obviously I had the idea previously where we discussed the character of rulers, but then I had another idea where I was thinking, well, a lot of rulers share the same kind of resonator class, or rather the same kind of race. So I was thinking, why not make a video or a couple of video series where we take a look at some of these rulers who share a same race and maybe compare them and figure out which one is the best one in terms of their specific race. This one I'm starting off with elves, because I felt like elves were a pretty good one to start off with. Now, in terms of this series, I am only going to count things from Grim Cluster onwards. I do know there's a couple of elf rulers in the Valhalla series, but I feel like because of the playstyle back in the day of Valhalla, it wouldn't be very fair to compare those rulers to the current ones that we have, because it is vastly different, and obviously in terms of stats and in terms of abilities, it just doesn't compare. So I'm not going to include anything from the Valhalla set. I'm only going to include stuff from Grim Cluster onwards. And because this first one I'm doing is elves, I am going to count the recently spoiled Feastling ruler, because she is technically an elf, and even if the set isn't out yet, we do know what she does. So I'm going to include her in the list as well. But starting off here, we go way back into Grim Cluster, and our first elf ruler from this cluster was Christy, the Wind Tracker. On her ruler side, she has a J activate, which is basically the judgment that we now nowadays, is pay 4, which is 2 wind and 2 void. If your opponent controls a vampire, immortal, or werewolf resonator, you may pay 0 to play this ability instead. So Christy was really mainly to combat werewolves and vampires and immortals, although I don't think there was very many immortals back in the day. I can't think of any off the top of my head. But yeah, she was mainly your weapon against Dracula or the fake little red back in the day when you had werewolves and vampires popping up everywhere. Other than that, you would just pay 4 in order to judgment her, or you can tap her to draw a card. You cannot play this ability if you don't have exactly 5 cards in the hand. So you can get a little bit of card draw, but there is a stipulation in that obviously you need to not tap for a stone that turn, and you need to have at least 5 cards in your hand, otherwise you can't do that. She's pretty simple on this side. Again, in terms of today's standards, she'd probably not really hold up too well, considering that vampires and werewolves aren't really a staple now. Obviously, you get some vampires with Rhea, but I feel like most of the time if you're playing Rhea, you are not playing a strictly vampire build. You are playing other things in order to make the best use of her mystery counters and everything. So maybe not strictly a vampire build, but maybe it's helpful, but probably not. And when you flip her over, she becomes Van Helsing, basically the vampire hunter. She has got pretty good stats. She's a 1000/1000, which is nice, and she has an enter ability that target non-human J/resonator loses all abilities until end of turn. At the end of turn, destroy it. And that's basically all she does. She's only got that one flip ability. So she is actually kind of good, because the majority of J-Rulers are not actually humans. I think there's very few J-Rulers nowadays that are actually humans. You've got vampires, obviously, you've got the Dragonoids, you've got mermaids, I think you've got elementals. I can't remember whether Green-Gill still counts as a human, or whether he's counted as something else, like mage or magician or something like that. But this one enter ability is kind of cool, because at the end of the turn you just destroy it. Unless you have some way to cancel this ability, you aren't blowing up a J-Ruler. Other than that, she doesn't really do anything. She does have some pretty nice artwork and stuff. I quite like the Helsing artwork for her. I always wondered why she drastically changed so much when she became a proper vampire hunter. But I do like her. I think out of all of them, she is probably the weakest out of the elf rulers, because she was basically a product of her time. She was a product where werewolves and vampires were played very heavily, and you didn't see a lot of human resonator play or J-ruler play. So I don't think she would hold up as well today as she did maybe back in the day of Grim Cluster, because we've had so many changes and whatnot. But I still like her art-wise. I think she is really nice, and I like the contrast of the dark kind of purplish art on the J-ruler side, and then the front side is a lot of green art. I quite like that. So I think she is a pretty cool ruler. I just don't think that in today's standards she'd hold up very well compared to all the other elves. Moving on, we don't see another elf ruler until all the way up to Lapis Cluster. Alice Cluster didn't really have any elves to speak of in terms of rulers. So we're going to go to Lapis Cluster here and look at Feasting, 6 Sage of Wind. This was the very first Feasting ruler, and that made a lot of people very excited because a lot of people loved Feasting in particular. Her judgment was 5, so it was quite costly. It was 2 wind and 3 void. She was one of the first rulers, obviously, from the starter decks to come with the ability of Energize, which is basically if you go second, then you get this this will coin where you can banish it and spend the will. And whenever you play your second chant each turn, you put a 100/100 Wind Elf Resonator token into your field. She was pretty crazy because she was one of the ones that really amped up and basically boosted the Gwyber Turbo combos and whatnot. She basically, with the help of the Wind Elf tokens, you could get Gwyber out very, very easily, and she did see a lot of meta play, if I remember correctly, when Gwyber Turbo was still a thing. I don't think she sees as much play now, obviously because we've had Fair, which is like a different elf and everything, and obviously with Gwyber rotating out, there's not really been too much of a mechanic here to work with Feasting and her token generation. But she did have a good run in the meta, pretty much, when Gwyber Turbo was still a thing. She definitely did make her way in that kind of scenario. And obviously when she flips over, which I doubt anyone ever actually flipped her over if they were running the Gwyber Turbo engine, because she doesn't seem to work as well on the flip side. But on the flip side, she's an 800/800 6 Sages elf, and other elves you control gain 400/400. And whenever you play your second card each turn, put 2 100/100 Wind Elf Resonator tokens into your field. Obviously, I played her quite a lot. I did different combinations. I had a Mono Wind build with her at one point, and then I had a Darkness Wind build at one point where I was using Jeanne and tokens to make sure that Jeanne never died and everything. I do think that she holds up pretty well as one of the kind of Lapis Cluster starter deck rulers. Probably among those starter deck rulers, she is probably maybe the best one, I would think. Compared to the other ones, because the other ones you had was Mikage, you had Millium, you had Nyarlathotep, and you had McCutcheon. I think she was probably the better out of them, and her starter deck was probably the best out of them, because you managed to get Sacred Elf and Tamaz, and all that good support. So really, out of the elves, I think, in her time, she was probably, like, one of the better ones. Comparing her to the other ones is actually kind of tricky, because I feel like both her and Fair had their fair amount of time, get it, because it's Fair, in the meta, so you saw them a lot in like top 8 lists at GPs and everything, and they were played quite a lot. It's kind of hard to compare because they both do kind of different things, so it's hard to compare them, especially since she's a little bit on the weaker side when she flips, and she has a very expensive flip cost. So I don't know where I would place her. I think I would maybe place her second, and potentially going on into Fair here, I might place Fair top, but we need to go in and check him out to see, first of all, what I think of him. So, Fair Little Leo, I can never say his surname right, I swear I say it wrong every single time. He is another elf ruler, obviously. His judgment is a lot cheaper. It is 3, it is 2 wind and 1 void. He also comes with green energize, which is pretty neat. He has the ability where you rest 2 recovered elf resonators you control and recover a target magic stone. You only play this ability only once per turn. Now, this seems like such a small thing in hindsight, but if you think about it, you can do this to your advantage. Like, I remember, like, my friends, they would, like, have a turn 1 play where they'd be able to get, like, 3 elves out in the 1 turn, you know. You play, like, a Spirit Caller elf, it creates a token, you rest those, you recover your stone, you play the stone again to play, what, another Spirit Caller elf or a Sacred Elf or something like that. It is crazy to get those elf tokens out, and just being able to get lots of tokens out, especially the elf ones, make it really good for Fair, because then he can basically he can recover his stones whenever he wants, as long as he's got an ample amount of elves in play that are not rested. So he's pretty good on that side, but obviously he gets even better on his flip side. When he flips over, he's an 800/1000 with some very pretty artwork, might I add. And he has this kind of wall of text, but we'll get through it easily enough. When he enters the field, he basically enters with 4 Gale Protection counters. And when he enters the field, you can search your deck for an elf resonator with total cost 4 or less and put it into the field, then shuffle your deck. So you could essentially maybe search for his daughter Tia, who was a 4 cost, who then also searches out the Falcon, or you could search out an Oberon and get yourself some more elf tokens and everything. He doesn't have his ability to rest the elf resonators and recover stones on this side. That is only on his ruler side, but probably if he still had it on this side, he would be even more broken than he already was. You can essentially remove a Gale Protection counter from him to give a target elf barrier until end of turn, and he counts as an elf obviously, so he can give himself barrier, and you can remove a Gale Protection counter from him and give a target elf plus 300/300 until end of turn. So since you've got at least 4 of these counters, you can ping this so many times whenever you want, and it's very, very hard to get rid of these counters. I think the best way would be the Powerless Dragonoid spell, the one that just removes counters and everything. So I think that would be a very, very interesting there. But he is pretty much he was a pretty strong meta play. I would think you had your mono wind build. There was like mono red. There was like a green and red build of him at one point, I believe, making use of Maria Bella, if I remember correctly, and all kind of shenanigans. He definitely had his time. Like, I don't know if you would still play fair in the current format, because obviously it is full of Scheherazade. I don't know if you would ever actually want to play him at all. But he is certainly a different breed of elf, essentially. Like, he does something incredibly different to what Feastling does. So it's kind of hard to compare the two, although both of them did have their time in the limelight in terms of being in top 8s at GPs. Feastling mainly for a different reason. She was mainly to kind of like bolster the Gwyber Turbo engine, whereas Fair, I feel like he was just there to completely like stall out your opponent in terms of building walls and then flipping over and just kind of ramming in for home and just wiping it out once you manage to protect most of your elves and everything. Definitely, I think maybe Fair is like the better one in this instance because he was cheaper to flip and his mechanic is like a lot easier to kind of get off. Like, most of the time with Feasting, you might not get 2 spells played in a turn, just depending on like your will and what cards you have in hand. So I feel like he was the better of the elves, well, during this time, really. But the last one really is like a little bit different because we don't really know how well that's going to play because she just got spoiled. But I will discuss her again because even though I think I pretty much discussed her yesterday or something like that, I will briefly go over her again and try and compare her to the other elves here. So our last elf obviously is the new Feasting, aka CL Possessed, who is CL Ancestor of the Priestess. I did talk about this yesterday in the spoiler discussion, so I won't hang on to it for too long, but this Feasting is obviously very different in that it's not really got anything at all to do with elves in particular. Similar to what Christy was like in that she didn't really support elves in particular, she kind of just supported herself. This one is also kind of a one where it basically supports itself, where it has a Judgment for 1 green, an Energize for 1 green, and at the end of your turn you attach auras to it that were in your graveyard to it. Pretty simple stuff, and then when she flips over, obviously she's got the huge wall of text, depending on how many auras you've got attached to her. So essentially she's one of those ones where she's not really supporting the stuff that's in your field, she is supporting herself for when she eventually judgments, because her judgment is obviously very, very cheap. So your main goal here is to get auras into your graveyard and attached to her, and then when you flip her over you can activate all these different abilities. You can obviously give her Imperishable, which is very handy. None of the other elf rulers had access to Imperishable. You would have to try and figure out a way to give it to them themselves. Although, obviously, Fair could give himself Barrier, which is very, very handy. Feasting here doesn't have the ability to get Barrier. But you could just use something where it's like, oh, give this thing Barrier until end of turn. But at the same time, she's got so many options. Like, similar to Fair, she's got a lot of options under her belt here as to what she actually does. She can obviously gain Imperishable. She's got 3 or more auras. She can do all this stuff for each aura she's got, so you can put 4 100 counters on a target resonator, or you can get 2 wind spirit tokens into the field with flying, or you can recover up to 3 target magic stones, or gain 1,000 life. She's just got so many options. Now, I don't know how well she's going to do in the meta, considering that Scheherazade is still a thing, and Scheherazade can easily, with Lorite and all this stuff, cancel each one of these abilities, or even cancel them all, because I'm pretty sure someone said that the way it works is that this enter ability is like a blanket effect. So if you choose 3 and they somehow cancel, they cancel all 3 abilities. It's not cancelling each individual effect. So that's the one thing that I think is a downside to this ruler. But obviously this card isn't out yet, it's only just been spoiled, so we don't actually know how well it will play in the meta here. But I feel like with Scheherazade still in the meta, and unless she gets banned probably, I feel like there isn't going to be much room for poor Feasting here. As much as I would love for her to be in the meta and everything and get played and, you know, do well, I fear for her and her kind of blanket enter ability here that could easily be cancelled by a Lorite. Just like, you know, if they've got 1 will up, then you better not flip because they will probably Lorite your enter ability, and that will hurt so much. But she is a 1000, so she's kind of like up there with strength with Christy, but she obviously has a little bit more versatility. So if I had to rank these different elf rulers in terms with each other, I would probably put Fair first. I would put this Feasting, the Phantom Wind Feasting, I would put her second for potential. I would put the other Feasting third, mainly because her main she was mainly the driving force behind Gwyber Turbo, and now that Gwyber Turbo isn't really a thing, she doesn't really see too much play now, so it seems like she's had her fun in the sun, and now now she's kind of retired a little bit. And then finally, I would put Christy at the bottom. No offense to her, but she's really a bit outdated in terms of the current format. Even in Wonder standards, you're probably not going to see a lot of vampire play or werewolf play, so she still isn't maybe very good there. But that's how I would rank these different elf rulers. How would you rank them, guys? Would you place them differently? Would you like put one of the feastlings at the top? Would you like give Christy a bit more of a chance? Or are you just sick to death of seeing Fair and you just wish he would burn in the fire? Since a lot of people do hate wind, especially the wind rulers, and somehow they're always broken in some form or another. But let me know what you thought of this video, guys. Let me know what your favourite elf is. It doesn't have to be a ruler. It can be one of the Resonator elves if you want. And I will see all you guys next time. This video was made possible thanks to patrons such as Houston Moore, Alucard, and Craig McCutcheon.